My name is Holly Adler, and I was 33 years old during the week my uncle decided that a signature from a woman who had just passed away didn't mean anything at all. It was only 3 days after we had buried my grandmother. We were all gathered in her quiet living room to hear what her will had to say, and my Uncle Raymond stood up after just one line was read aloud, looked straight at me, and laughed right in my face. He said it twice so everyone in the room could hear him clearly. "A piece of paper won't stop me, and that house is mine." 8 days later, he was in court filing a lawsuit against her estate. He was so angry that he walked out before the lawyer even finished reading the will. That turned out to be the most expensive mistake he ever made in his life. But standing in that living room, he had absolutely no idea what was coming for him. Let me tell you a little about who I actually am, because Raymond spent 5 months in a courtroom painting a picture of me that had nothing to do with the truth. I am a hospice nurse. My work is to sit with people in the very last rooms of their lives, to keep them comfortable and at peace when medicine has run out of answers. I am good at it. I learned by working long night shifts and paying for my education one paycheck at a time. For years before she died, my grandmother's heart began to weaken. Because I loved her, I moved into her old house on Linden Street and took care of her every single day. Her name was Vivian Hartley. She was 80 years old when I moved in, and 84 when she finally passed. Every night I worked late. She left the porch light on for me. It was a small yellow bulb above the front steps, but it meant I never once walked into a dark house alone. I would send her a text on my way home, and she would always write back the same single word. On. That was her way of keeping watch over me. Most people assume that a person who spends their life caring for others must be soft, easily pushed around, the kind of woman who doesn't know how to say no. That wasn't quite right. In my work, I knew exactly how to hold firm boundaries. The problem was I had never learned to do that at home with my own family. I said yes to every extra shift, every extra patient, every favor anyone asked. I had almost no life of my own because I was so busy trying to keep everyone else afloat. Vivian saw that happening in me more clearly than I saw it in myself. One night near the end, she took my hand and told me she had made sure no one could take this away from me. I thought she was talking about her rocking chair or the plants in the garden. I told her not to worry about things like that. I had no idea she had already spent an afternoon at a lawyer's office, quietly building a wall to protect me. The rest of the family wasn't absent so much as they were simply never really present when Vivian needed them. Raymond, her only son, lived 40 minutes away and visited once or twice a year, usually around the holidays and usually for about an hour. His wife Lorraine came with him. During those visits, Lorraine spent most of her time looking at the house rather than talking to the woman who lived in it. She would run her hand along the wooden staircase and ask in a casual voice whether the roof had ever been repaired. Their daughter Brooke came even less often, but if you followed her online, you would think she was there every Sunday. Every few months, she would post a photograph of Vivian with a caption about treasuring these moments. The dates on those photos never matched her actual visits. I never corrected her. I just kept changing bed sheets and filling pill boxes every week. There is one moment from 2 years before the end that I still think about. Raymond was standing in the middle of the living room with his phone held out in front of him, walking along the walls, tapping the screen. He was measuring the room. He saw me watching and grinned, without any embarrassment at all. "Just curious," he said, "for when this is mine one day." My grandmother was sitting 6 feet away. She heard every word. She didn't argue, didn't look upset, didn't say a single thing. She just looked at her son and gave him a very small, private smile before going back to her crossword puzzle. I understand now that smile was her first move in a game none of the rest of us even knew was being played. During her last winter, Vivian became quiet and focused in a particular way. It was the way some people get when they have decided to get everything in order. She had a heavy brass key on a faded blue ribbon, soft from 40 years of hanging on the same hook by the door. One afternoon, she took it down and pressed it into my palm, folding my fingers close around it. "This stays with you," she told me. I tried to give it back and said I already had my own key, that hers belonged by the door. She wouldn't take it. "You aren't listening. Holly," she said, "it stays with you." I thought she might be getting confused, which sometimes happens near the end. But she wasn't confused at all. The following week, a car came in the morning and brought her back by lunchtime. She had gone to see her lawyer, a man named Walter Bell she had known for decades. She didn't tell me what they discussed. She just settled into her chair with a cup of coffee and said she had made it so no one could take it from me and that it was all done. I asked what she meant. She patted my hand and started talking about whether the blue flowers in the garden would come back in spring. I was running late to see a patient across town, and I let it go. I dropped that brass key into a small dish beside my bed and didn't think about it again for a long time. I tell myself now I should have asked more questions. But the truth is she didn't need my help. She knew exactly what she was doing. Vivian passed away on a Tuesday morning in early March. She was in her own bed with the porch light still on outside. I was holding her hand. In my profession, we call that a good death. It was quiet, and she wasn't afraid, and she was home. I have helped 100 strangers through that same moment, but it is entirely different when it is the woman who raised you. I sat with her for a long time before I called anyone. Once I did, the rest of the family arrived within an hour, and suddenly her death didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. Raymond took over the kitchen and started giving instructions about the funeral home, the newspaper notice, the flowers. He moved through the house like a man who had been running it for years. Lorraine walked room to room with her arms crossed, looking as though she were doing arithmetic. At the funeral, Raymond gave a speech about being a devoted son to a mother he had visited twice a year. People cried. Afterward, he stood at the door, shaking hands like the host of a party. I stayed in the back. Brooke posted a black and white photograph with a long caption about how much she would miss her grandmother. I wasn't angry yet. When grief first moves into a house, it takes up every room. There isn't space left for any other feeling. 3 days after the funeral, Walter Bell came to the house to read the will. He was nearly 70, a careful man who spoke quietly and read every word, as though words were the only thing in the world you could truly count on. The things Vivian left behind weren't enormous, but they mattered. The house on Linden Street was paid off completely. There was also a savings account and some long-held investments. When Mr. Bell read that the house and most of the money were being left to me, I heard Lorraine pull in a sharp breath. Raymond's face changed color. But Mr. Bell kept reading in the same calm voice, as though he were going through a grocery list. He said there was a specific gift of $75,000 in cash set aside for Raymond Hartley. Then he read a particular line. It said that if anyone named in the will attempted to contest it in court or assisted someone else in contesting it, they would receive nothing at all. Their gift would dissolve as if they had died before Vivian did. He read that part twice because Vivian had instructed him to do exactly that. Raymond wasn't listening by then. The moment he heard the house was going to me, everything else became noise. He stood up so fast his chair scraped loud across the floor. His face was deep red. He pointed at the paper in Mr. Bell's hands as though it had personally insulted him, called it a joke, said I had tricked her, that she wasn't thinking clearly. Then he laughed that mean, small laugh and said what he would keep saying for months. A piece of paper won't stop me, and that house is mine. He walked out before the will was finished. He never heard about the $75,000. He never heard the rule that would take it from him. Raymond and Lorraine came back that same evening. They stood on the front porch under the yellow light. Lorraine did most of the talking, using that particular voice people use when they want to sound hurt and reasonable at the same time. She said they didn't want to fight. They just wanted what was fair. But her definition of fair was that I had moved into a house with a lonely old woman, kept her from her family, and worn her down until she signed everything over to me. Raymond stood behind her and added that everyone could see what I had done. I stood in the doorway and didn't let them in. My hands were not shaking, which surprised me. I felt steady, the way I feel when I am checking a patient's pulse. I told them I had taken care of her, and that was all I had done. Lorraine smiled the way people smile when they think you've just confirmed their point. She told me I wasn't even a real Hartley, that family should get the house, that I was just an Adler. That was true in the narrow sense. My mother was Vivian's daughter, but my last name came from a father who left when I was small. To them, my name was a reason I didn't deserve anything. To me, it was just a name. I told them good night and closed the door. That same night, Brooke started a group message with 30 relatives I barely knew, asking what had happened to the house. A lie needs almost no time to grow when the people hearing it weren't there to see the truth. I muted the message and didn't defend myself. What I didn't understand yet was that my silence wasn't weakness. My grandmother had already taken care of everything. But there was a night not long after when I sat at the kitchen table holding that brass key and almost gave up. I had spent my whole life smoothing things over for other people. The urge to do it again was powerful. I actually drafted a message to Mr. Bell saying it might be easier to just let them have the house. My thumb was over the send button. Then I looked out the window and saw the porch light burning the way it had for 1,000 nights. I deleted that message and wrote a different one, asking if we could talk. Mr. Bell called me back almost immediately. His voice was steady and kind. He told me to come to his office in the morning because there were things my grandmother had wanted me to know when the time was right. I didn't sleep. The next day, I sat across from him in a room that smelled like old books and coffee, and he put a thick folder in front of me and told me what Vivian had spent her last winter building. The will had been written by Mr. Bell himself, not pulled from the internet. She had signed it in front of 2 witnesses who had no reason to favor anyone, a retired schoolteacher and a legal assistant. But she had done something more. She had asked her doctor, a man named Dr. Calloway, who had treated her for 9 years, to evaluate her and write a formal letter. That letter stated in plain language that Vivian Hartley was of sound mind. She knew what she owned, who her family was, and that she was making her own decisions without any pressure from anyone. Mr. Bell tapped the folder and said my grandmother had known someone would try to break the will. She had made sure they couldn't. I asked about the rule Raymond had laughed at. Mr. Bell explained that in our state, the courts take such provisions seriously. If someone named in the will sues without good cause, they don't just lose the case. They also lose what the will intended to give them. I thought about this for a moment and told him the house had been left to me, so I was the one who stood to lose if Raymond won. What exactly did Raymond stand to lose? Mr. Bell looked at me over his glasses. That, he said, was the part Raymond had walked out before hearing. 8 days after the will was read, a man knocked on my door and handed me an envelope. Raymond had filed suit. He was claiming undue influence, the same story Lorraine had told on the porch, now dressed in legal language. He wanted the will thrown out and the house transferred to him. On the last page of the documents, Vivian's rule appeared again, now listed as Exhibit C, no longer just words in a living room, but fact entered into the public record. Raymond had hired a lawyer whose face appeared on bus bench advertisements. He was paying by the hour and had taken out a loan to do it. He was suing for a house without ever asking what that might cost him. I called Mr. Bell, who told me to say nothing to anyone, sign nothing, and not to try to fix this for Raymond. He said that last part twice. I want to be honest about something. Raymond wasn't simply cruel. He was 58 years old with a failed business, serious debt, and no clear way forward. To him, the house wasn't a place of memories. It was a lifeline. When I understood that, I felt something close to pity. I remembered him being kind to me when I was small, fixing a broken swing set one summer afternoon. But then I looked at his messages in the family group chat, where he had written that I was a professional who robs old people. He had told 30 relatives I had stolen from his own mother. Whatever pity I had felt folded up and went away. People can be human and still choose cruelty. I closed the chat and didn't reply. A week later, he appeared at the front door without calling, hand out, wanting the brass key on the blue ribbon. I was in my work clothes heading to a shift. I told him a judge would decide who got the house. Not him and not me. He stepped closer and said again that a piece of paper wouldn't stop him. I told him that if he was so sure the house would be his, he didn't need the key. He didn't have an answer. Before he left, I told him one more time to find a real lawyer and talk to someone who would be honest with him before he did something he couldn't undo. He laughed and told me not to give him instructions. That was the last time I tried to help him. 2 days later, Mr. Bell called me back to his office for something he couldn't send through the mail. He set a cream-colored envelope on the desk between us with my name written on it in my grandmother's handwriting. She had written it the same week she signed the will and left instructions that it should only be given to me if someone contested the estate. He said if Raymond had walked away and accepted what he was given, I never would have needed to read it. He didn't know what was inside. He just told me to make sure I did read it, because she had written it for a reason. I took it home and sat with it at the kitchen table for a long time before I opened it. The first line said that if I was reading this, Raymond had done the things she had prayed he wouldn't. She wrote in short, clear sentences. She had watched him for years and seen how he valued things more than people. But she hadn't cut him out. She had left him $75,000, enough to pay his debts and start again. She called it a door, a good one. If he had accepted it like a son, he would have been fine. But because she knew him, she put a lock on that door. The rule wasn't meant to punish him. It was a final test. If he let things be, the family would hold together. If he grabbed for more, the law would take even the gift she had tried to give him. She wrote that she wasn't stealing from him. She was giving him one last chance to be the man she had always hoped he might become. Then she wrote the line I will carry with me for the rest of my life. I didn't leave you out, Raymond. You left first. I sat at that table and understood that Raymond was about to lose $75,000 he didn't even know existed. I called Mr. Bell the next morning and asked whether I should tell him. Mr. Bell said I had no legal obligation to say anything, and that attempting to warn Raymond now might actually look like another manipulation. He reminded me that I had already told Raymond to find a proper lawyer. Raymond had laughed at me. Mr. Bell was right, and I hated it. I put the letter in the drawer next to the brass key and told him to let the process continue. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like setting down a weight I had been carrying for much too long. Raymond's lawyer searched Vivian's medical records and bank statements, looking for evidence of pressure or manipulation. He found nothing, because there was nothing to find. On our side, we had the doctor's letter, the 2 witnesses, and 4 years of my own nursing notes documenting Vivian's care and her clarity of mind. Outside the courtroom, the family's version of events began to unravel too. Brooke's post stopped working when a neighbor named Doris commented that she lived next door and had seen me there every single day for 4 years, but had never once seen Brooke. Brooke deleted the post. I realized that the truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be seen. Raymond's lawyer eventually told him they were going to lose. He explained that the medical letter and the nursing notes were too solid to overcome, and that there was money in the will waiting for Raymond if he dropped the case. Lorraine convinced him to keep going. She believed I would give in just to make the noise stop. She didn't know me as well as she thought she did. Before the final hearing, we sat across from each other at a table to see if a deal could be reached. I looked at Raymond and felt the old habit stirring, that lifelong pull to make everyone comfortable, to smooth things over, to give something away to stop the friction. But I thought about Vivian. She had spent the last months of her life building a protection for me specifically, so I would not have to bargain away what she had given. I told Raymond I wasn't trying to punish him. I just wasn't going to save him from himself anymore. We didn't make a deal. Walking out of that room, I felt like I could finally breathe. The day of the hearing arrived. The doctor and the witnesses testified. Raymond's own text messages were read into the record, showing years of being too busy to visit his mother. There was no one keeping him away but his own choices. The room was very quiet. I sat and said nothing. I didn't need to. The paper spoke for me. Judge Voss didn't deliberate long. He found the will valid and confirmed I had done nothing improper. The house was officially mine. Then he addressed the rule. Raymond had filed suit without sufficient cause, and so the provision applied. The $75,000 Raymond had never known about was gone. When Raymond understood what he had lost, he started shouting in the courtroom. He could not believe that a piece of paper had taken his money away. But it was finished. He had lost everything by reaching for more than he was given. In the hallway afterward, Lorraine turned on Raymond and began blaming him for losing the money, as though she had played no part in any of it. Raymond tried to blame me, said I had let him walk into a trap. I reminded him that I had told him twice to get a real lawyer, and he had laughed at me both times. Then I stepped into the elevator and watched the doors close between us. He was 58 years old, standing in a courthouse hallway, angry and empty-handed. I drove home to Linden Street. The porch light was on. I walked inside, put the brass key back on its hook by the door, and sat down in the quiet that Vivian had worked so hard to protect. I didn't celebrate. I planted the blue flowers she loved and watched them come back in the spring. I stopped saying yes to every extra shift and started taking care of myself the way I had spent years taking care of everyone else. Some relatives reached out, and I welcomed them back without closing the door, but I made sure they understood the house was mine. My grandmother never raised her voice. She didn't argue in that living room or chase her son down the driveway. She just sat in her chair, gave her son a small private smile, and went back to her crossword puzzle. She had already done everything that needed to be done. She wrote one quiet, powerful line and trusted that the truth would hold. It did. That is the whole story. One brass key, one letter written in careful handwriting, and a light that never went out.